You know it's this. Take a perk and a talk of this shit. Money swallowed like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look at better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the second part of What If Deku Enters Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid. Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of Pixel's Fanbook on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Thanks for the food. The story continues once more as it starts where we last left off with our nerdy, glasses-wearing cinnamon roll and his family and friends at a restaurant that wasn't quirkest to the quirkless, or those less fortunate. They had ordered their meals with the adults having various meals like butanoshagayaki ginger pork for Iane, kushikatsu for Inko, and simple miso soup for Caitlin. For the children, Izuku ordered katsudon, Reiko ordered omuresu, Pony ordered ramen and Eri ordered onigiri. Toru really didn't order anything for some reason. Caitlin finished her food first out of everyone as she was now taking a swig from her large beer. DMN. That sure hits the spot. Caitlin yells, having a present blush on her cheeks. Iane just shakes her head at how rowdy the American was getting. Must you really use such crude matters? Iane asks, wiping the remains of the butanoshagayaki from her mouth and cheeks with a napkin. Caitlin turns to her and pouts. Oh, why do you have to be such a spoilsport, Aya? You've got to lighten up a bit, and live more. Come on, drink with me. Caitlin yells with Iane turns to her with a deadpan expression. I do indeed live, and do you remember the last time you forced me into drinking alcohol? Iane asks, she already knew the answer but she wanted to hear from Caitlin about this. Nope. You know DMN well that when I drink, I can't remember Hog's hit. Hell, I can't even remember my DMN name if I drink too much. Caitlin says. I do, and I had never been so embarrassed in my entire life before that night. Iane says, but Caitlin just pouts. Oh come on, don't be a sourpuss. Just take one sip. Caitlin says, SWNGNG the pint of beer to Annie but the white-haired woman didn't take it. No. Iane says. Oh come on. I mean, a little won't hurt anyone. Caitlin says. No, and people do get hurt even every I drink. Iane says. Come on. Please. Just once. Caitlin asks, trying to convince her. Inko was quiet during all this, she was there the night Caitlin forced Iane to drink when they had a girls' night out, and let's just say, telepathic powers and whiskey do not mix well as things, including cars, buildings, signs, clothes tend to not make it out of that in one piece. Both she, Iane, and another woman who was there with them swore that they'll never let her get drunk again. Let's just hope that Reiko-chan isn't the same. Otherwise, I wish you luck Izuku. Inko thought. Alright. Sheesh. Caitlin mutters, taking a sip from her drink. She turns to Izuku and Toru and sees the dragon just sitting there, next to him as he ate his. Okay Inko, you got to tell me. How did little Izu find himself in a situation where he saved a dragon's life? Caitlin asks, Inko blinks. Inko was about to say something but stopped when she realized that she doesn't know how the two really met. You know, I don't even know Izuku really met Toru. I never got a chance to ask. Inko says, she turns to Izuku who was drinking some juice, sweetie, could you tell us just how you really ran into Toru since we're all here? She asks, Izuku slightly choked on his beverage but got over it and turns to the others and saw they were looking at him. I don't know guys. It's kind of embarrassing to say. Izuku says, blushing for some reason. Oh, come on little green. It can't be that bad. Caitlin says, triply swaying around. I don't know. Izuku says. Yeah, Izzy. You've got to tell us how you two met. Pony says. I am interested in the origin of Toru. Reiko says, showing a little amount of emotion. I so well am interested in hearing this. It's not every day you hear someone tell the story of how they've met a real dragon. Ain says. Please Oniai-chan. Tell us the story. Eri begs, wanting to hear this. Izuku was still unconvinced about telling the story since it was embarrassing. Then, he feels someone pull on his. You can tell them the heroic story of how you saved me Izu. Toru says in a flirty way, batting her eyes at Izuku, causing him to blush. Pony and Reiko saw this and their eyes started to twitch as forks begin to float off the table while the section of the table Pony was grabbing onto started to crack. Fine. I'll tell the story the best I can. Izuku says, he takes off his glasses and places them on the table. And I'll fill in on things he misses since he was out of it that day. Toru says, moving next to Izuku, much to Reiko and Pony's displeasure. Izuku takes a deep breath before he faces everyone. Okay, so I was running away from Bakugou and his goons after they beat the CR-, Izuku was saying but stops and sees his mom gave him a smile, one that promised terror if he swore. Crud out of me and I fled to the forest that's outside of the city to hide there. Izuku says, and the story begins. Muzutafu Nature Reserve, Muzutafu, Shizuoka Prefecture, Japan. Was the afternoon and the sun was beginning to set, and in the forest, was Izuku, hiding behind a tree while panting and shaking in fear. He was injured a bit, sporting bruises and burn marks on his face while his uniform was roughed up in some areas. He looks around for any sign of Bakugou and his goons but much to his relief, they were nowhere in sight. Okay, I lost them. Good. Izuku thought, letting a sigh of relief out. He stands and started dusting himself from the dirt and some ash from some of the areas where Bakugou had used his quirk on him until he started to feel dizzy, nausea and a headache began to form in his mind. He thought over these and realized one thing that possibly had caused this. Ah great, I got a concussion. Guess the last hit from Bakugou Musty has done it in on my brain. Izuku thought, he knew it wasn't a good idea to stay in the forest while having a concussion, he had to leave so he could get medical attention. I got to get out of here. He thought and with that thought in mind. He started to leave the forest but, he soon found that to be a challenge. Due to the concussion giving him a lack of coordination, he was walking around in circles and could barely walk in a straight line for too long. He wanders a bit more as he comes into a clearing in the middle of the forest. He wobbles a bit before he hits something and falls onto the ground. Ow, what hit me? Izuku asks, rubbing his bee, he stands up and was about to turn away. Human. When he hears someone speak with a deep growl. Huh. He looks around for anyone that could be there with him but saw no one. Blamed his concussion for tricking him, he was about to leave when. Out of what hole did thou crawl? He hears the same deep growl again, this time, clearer. He turns around and came face to face with a green, European dragon with black wings and horns that looked like bamboo tree branches. No way. Izuku stutters, his eyes widening at what he was seeing. He couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe that. You've got a Drago quirk. Just like the dragon hero Ryuko. Izuku shouts, excitedly running up to the dragon and looking at it, analyzing it. What? The dragon was very confused at what Izuku was doing as it had a large sweat drop running down the side of its head. You have scales. Are they fire resistant? And your wings? Can you fly with them since your body does look to have more weight? And do you have any other abilities? Like fire breathing or mutter? Izuku muttering up a storm with the kanji floating around him in bold letter. The dragon's sweat drop grew by the minute as it listens to Izuku muttering and could barely even understand him. Having had enough of this, the dragon takes in a deep breath and blows steam out of its nose, hitting Izuku and making him fall on his butt. And the fall caused him to break out of his muttering storm. Ouch! Izuku hisses, feeling the pain as he rubs his bee. He takes off his glasses and wipes the steam off while looking at the dragon. "Why did you do that?" he asks as the dragon huffs out smoke. "Thou was rambling and was annoying me without questions," the dragon says. Izuku pouts as he puts his glasses back on. "Oh come on. My questions aren't all that bad." Izuku yells, his dizziness was getting worse, and he couldn't tell where he was now. He looks at the dragon and spots something on it, more like stabbing into it. It was a large longsword, stabbing into the dragon's back. "Hey, what's that?" Izuku asks, pointing to the sword. The dragon knew what he was pointing to and huffs at him. "That mortal is a sword based by a god. It is killing me as it is destroying my magical reserves and soon, I will die. And to think that the thing I will see is a pathetic human," the dragon says. "Want me to pull it out?" Izuku asks, surprising the dragon. It looks at him. "What?" the dragon says. Izuku takes off his backpack and moves to the left side of the dragon, and starts climbing it. "Wait, no. If a mere mortal were to touch the blade of God, their mind shall be torn." The dragon yells, trying to make Izuku not touch the sword, but he doesn't listen. He got onto its back and was by the sword as he looks at it up and down. "Well, I don't know anything about God and all that, but if he does exist," Izuku says before grabbing the blade of the sword, "then he shouldn't have stabbed you at all." He yells as he starts to pull the sword up. It moves slowly, much to the dragon's shock as she starts to panic. "No, no, no, no." The dragon yells, terrified of what was about to happen when he pulled the sword. It closes its eyes and waits for the backlash. When it feels the pain go away and hears a loud thud on the ground, it opens eyes and they widen upon seeing the sword was laying on the ground next to it with its BLD on the blade. "There. That should be better," Izuku says, beaming as he hops off the dragon's back and walks back to his bag. While he does so, the dragon was looking at him in shock at what he had done. How? How was he able to remove the blade of God without his mind being torn apart? That should not be possible. The dragon thought, trying to think of a possible reason for how this mere human was able to pull out a sword meant for a god and meant to kill her. "Hey! Are you listening to me?" The dragon was brought out of its thought when it hears Izuku yelling at it. It looks down and sees him looking at her with an annoyed expression with his bag open in front of him. Apologizes. "I was thinking of something," the dragon says. Izuku snots. "I know that this is my concussion taking over my mind and making me see things, but I've got to ask. Why were you a big JRK to me?" Izuku asks, digging into his bag. Apologizes. "You've saved me regardless and I much appreciate it," the dragon says. Izuku just waves its apology off. "So, what happened to you that you got stabbed by that sword?" Izuku asks, pointing to the large blade. "I was engaged in a vicious battle with a kingdom. The humans there were trying everything within their power to defeat me, but their efforts were fruitless as I was taking down their forces. I was about to be victorious when I was blindsided by the gods and I barely escaped to this world for survival. The sword was enchanted and I could not remove myself as it burns me with every touch," the dragon says, mentality cursing the god that made the sword and the god that stabbed it with it. "That how could I touch it? It didn't burn me," Izuku says, looking at his hands. "He didn't feel a thing from the blade when he grabbed it. I believe the reason why you were able to safely remove the sword is that you lack faith, which is why you took it out of me without destroying us in the process," the dragon says. "It was no problem. It was the least I could do," Izuku says, throwing his arm and legs out as he falls onto his back. He shoots up and looks at the dragon again. "Hey, are you hungry?" he asks, catching the dragon off guard. Well, the dragon was saying, but Izuku cuts it off. You've got to be. Izuku yells. He digs into his bag, looking for something, and finds what he was looking for. He pulls it out and it was a bento box. Come on. I've got some leftovers from my lunch today. We can share it. Izuku says, opening the bento that still had plenty of food inside. Well. The dragon was about to decline, but it never got the chance since Izuku suddenly got up to its face. Come on. Eat, eat, eat. Izuku yells, shoving the bento at the dragon's nose. The food did smell heavenly, and it was hungry. Seeing as this human got it in a corner, the dragon sighed. Fine. The dragon says. It stands up and conjures a magical seal in front of it, its body glows and it starts to shrink and change form. It changes into a human girl who had long blonde hair with flaming pink tips and red-orange eyes with dilated pupils, and buxom figure with large thighs and plump, bouncy melons. She was wearing a brown tattered cloak which fortunately covered her NDE body. Her horns from before were still there, on the sides of her head, and she had a large green tail sticking out from under the cloak. Izuku looks at her and was amazed by the transformation, thinking it could be a transformation quirk like Ryuko's, but he does blush, seeing that she was NDE under the cloak. So you're a lady dragon then? Izuku asks. The dragon nods and sits down in front of him. He sets the bento down and lets the dragon take a piece of food from it. Yes, I am female. To be honest, I distaste using this spell. Just being as a human makes me sick. But, if the situation requires it, then I have no other choice. The dragon girl says as she starts eating the piece of food and found it to be delicious. All right. Let's eat, just as boy and girl who met eating together. Izuku yells, taking a bite of his food as the girl looks at him. Wait, you're a boy? The girl asks, causing Izuku to freeze and lose color before he looks at the dragon girl with. Hey, of course, I'm a boy. What did you think I was a girl? Just because you're a girl won't stop me from punching you in the melons. Izuku yells, and the scene moves from them to the sunset sky as birds were flying by. And thanks to his concussion and with its confusion and deliriousness he was currently experiencing, say, can I Kua feel? Izuku asks before. Boing. 2 hours later. The sun had gone down a while ago and the sky was filling the sky. In the forest, the creatures who lived in it were getting ready to sleep or ready for their night when. Ha 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 ha, 2 people were laughing their hearts off in a clearing. Izuku and the dragon girl were having a blast as they were talking about the worst experiences in their lives. Izuku took off his jacket and shirt and only had a red t-shirt on. So, you got into a fight with another dragon just because they took your lunch? Izuku asks, chuckling while the dragon girl was downing some of his juice before taking the bottle away from her mouth and turning to him. Yeah, and that really ticked me off. Do you know how long it takes for a dragon of my caliber to find a whole farm with the freshest cows on it and no human in sight? I was mad for a week after that as well. The dragon girl yells, shooting fire out of her mouth as she does so. Oh man, I can so relate to that. I'm quirkless and I got people who hate me due to me being different from them. Just because I don't have a quirk doesn't make me less of a human than the rest of you. I mean, come on. I'm not a freaking animal, am I? Izuku yells. Oh, let me burn this place for you. You can start anew somewhere else. The dragon girl offers, her eyes glowing dangerously while she smirks. Izuku just laughs and shakes his head. Thanks for the offer, but I have my friends and family here still who've helped me survive this horrible place. Izuku says. The dragon girl stands up and throws her arms out. Oh, I wish support like that. I've got friends and all, but there is this one dragon I can't stand. She just irritates me. The dragon girl yells. Izuku looks at her and snaps his fingers at her. Don't we all, sister? Since I've got a piece of blonde poop that won't leave me alone. I'm thinking that he's got to be gay since he's never once left me alone of a single day at school those last 10 years. Izuku says. Ha 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 ha. The two laugh as they held one another by their shoulders and sway when the girl stops and looks up and burp. Lets out a burp with a spark of fire going along with it. She looks back to Izuku and the two lose it. Ha ha ha, the two laugh some more. Izuku falls onto his back and rolls on the ground in a hysterical fashion while the dragon girl started pounding her fist onto the ground, creating a crater that enlarges with every hit. After a while, they stop laughing and breathe as they try to catch their breaths. Izuku looks up at the dragon girl and stares at her for a bit before looking up to the sky and seeing the many stars lighting it up. You know, on nights like this, I just look at the sky from my room and wonder, should I be even alive? Izuku says, making the dragon girl look at him. Huh? The dragon girl utters. I mean, I've got family who loves me and I love back, great friends who've stuck with me for so long. But, there are times where I get wonder, what would life be like if I had a quirk, or if I wasn't born at all? Izuku says, staring at the sky. The dragon girl looks at Izuku for a bit before she too looks up to the sky as they lay on the ground. Yeah, I wonder about that too sometimes. But the thing is, I'm all alone here. I can't go back to my original world without getting killed. And I have no one on this side of the realms. The dragon girl says, gaining a sad expression. Izuku sits up and looks at him, his eyes were getting foggy by the minute. Do you have a place you can stay? Izuku asks, the girl just shakes her head. No, I do not have a place to stay. But to be fair, I have been alone from the start. The dragon girl says, tears beginning to form at the corners of her eyes. Izuku looks at her for a bit more as he thinks of something that could help her and unintentionally, him in the long run. He makes his decision and turns back to the girl and asks the question that forever changed his fate and life. If you don't have a place to stay, you could stay with me and my family. Izuku asks, the dragon girl's eyes widen as she shoots up from the ground and looks at him. Really? The dragon girl asks, Izuku just nods. Yeah, you did say that you don't have a place to stay in this world. And you seem that you're alright, or a girl who's got a dragon quirk at least. Izuku says but whispers the last part to himself. He looks at the girl again, so, I'll ask again. Do you want to live with me and my family? He asks again. The dragon girl just looks at Izuku with her eyes watering and her lips started to tremble. Why yes I do. The dragon girl shouts as she jumps toward and hugged Izuku, shocking him. He then starts hearing her sobbing, he looks down and sees she was crying on his chest. Thank you. Thank you. The dragon girl sobs out, continuing to cry. Izuku smiles and pats her back, he was starting to feel really lightheaded and all but he was fighting it just a bit longer to comfort the girl. After a bit, she lets go and wipes her remaining tears away. Sorry for making you wet from my tears. The dragon girl apologizes but Izuku just waves it off. It's, no worry. Izuku says, his vision started to turn black. What is your name? The dragon girl asks her savior, wanting to know his name. I'm, Izukumidoriya. Izuku says. My name is strong to say in my native language but the closest translation in your language is, Toru. The dragon girl, now known as Toru says, Izuku smiles at her. Nice, to meet you, Toru. Izuku could only say before galling face first onto the ground, startling Toru. Izuku. Sir. Toru yells, scared that he must have died. After that, I just blacked out and don't remember what happened after I did. Present Izuku says but before he could end the story, he was interrupted. Oh. I'll take over from here. Present Toru says, she takes over the story. She rushes to him and turns him over and starts looking at his body, she found that he was still breathing, much to her relief. Ah, my head. Izuku moans out. Toru looks at him a bit more and notices the bruises on his face and body. He appears to be in pain and the pain must have finally caused him to faint. Let me fix that. Toru thought. She lifts her hand over Izuku's body and conjures up a magical seal, some magic shoot from the seal, and hits Izuku's body, causing it to glow, and after a bit, the glow subsides and Izuku was fully healed but was still cold. She looks at his bag and saw his wallet. Curious, she heads over to it and picks it up, and looks into it, and found some paper in it, silver, some cards, and 2 photos. She looks at the first photo and sees a younger Izuku who had a bright smile with one of his teeth missing and no glasses. He was dirty as he was covered in mud and was wearing overalls with a white t-shirt under the overalls. He wasn't alone in the photo, there were 2 girls with him in it. One of them had long but messy silver hair. She was wearing the same type of overalls Izuku was wearing, but she had gloves on and boots. She had a soft smile on her face. The other girl had thick, wavy blonde hair, styled in pigtails. She was the only one that didn't wear the same overalls as Izuku and the other girl. She instead wore a white t-shirt that had a yellow horseshoe print on it and blue jeans short, and she was barefoot. Well, but she didn't have normal feet. She had hooves, but she was also dirty and was holding a large hog on the ground as she smiles to the camera with the others. Toru looks at the other photo and sees something which she assumed was lodging due to how many were there. She sees Izuku in the picture, who looked to the same age as he was now, standing next to a woman that resembled him with long green hair tied in a bun ponytail as she smiles, and next to Izuku was a little girl with long white hair and a small horn on the right side of her head, brightly smiling as well. He looks back to the lounging and assumed that was where he lives. She picks up the now empty bento and juice bottle and heads over to the open backpack and puts them into the bag, along with the wallet, and closes it. She picks the bag up and straps it onto her back before turning around and heading over to Izuku and gently picking him up and his uniform. She holds him in a bridal style and she jumps into the sky, leaping over all the trees as she enters the city. She lands on a rooftop before she jumps again, leaping over the city and passing many buildings. While soaring in the air, Toru's eyes glow and she starts looking around for the lounging. It took a bit, but she saw it on the other side of the city. She lands on another building and turns her direction and jumps into the air again. After he passed out, I took him to the house and took him to his room. Present Toru says. At lounging, Toru lands on top of one of the buildings and sees that she had arrived. She took a deep breath and exhaled it before taking a whiff of the air, trying to catch a scent that resembled Izuku's. Fortunately, she did find a strong scent that was like Izuku's right at the next building. She leaps toward the building and summons her black wings to float in the air and reaches a window. She punches the window open and flies into a room. She looks around and saw the room had posters of heroes, wolves, ghosts, and horses, and had a few books on the floor and desk. She sees a bed and heads over to the bed and sets Izuku on it. She then takes the bag off and sets it next to the bed and looks back at the sleeping Izuku. Something came over her. She places her hand on his cheek and started caressing it. This mortal helped her, despite not knowing her that long. This was something she never expected from humans. It reminded her of the one other human she met in life. She looks at him and lets a gentle smile appear on her face. See you, Izuku. I'll be back when I'm ready. Toru says. She lets go of Izuku's face and heads over to his broken window. She climbs through it and summons her wings once more. She was about to fly out when she turns to Izuku one more time and looks at him, now making her decision. She jumps out the window and floats next to it. She summons her magical seal and somehow restores the window back to the way it was before. Seeing that her job was done, she turns and flies away and disappears into the night sky. And I left him in his room and headed back to the forest to destroy that sword so no one could use it again. It took me throwing it into the sea, but I got rid of it. After that, I spent the rest of the time in the forest recovering, since that blasted blade did leave a nasty wound on me by the time I recovered. I was ready to meet Izuku again. Present Toru says as the events of her going over to the Midoriya household and meeting the family and Izuku once again and becoming their maid. And she came to us when we were leaving for school on Monday. Since then, we've let her stay as my maid, and she comes with me to school. Since today was her first day there. Present Izuku says as the events of the day were replayed. So that's the story, I guess. Izuku says. The two finish the story of how they met, and they see that the mothers in the booth had tears filling in their eyes. That was so freaking adorable. Caitlin yells, pouring her eyes out from the story before taking a sip of her beer and going back to crying. It was like something out of a fantasy book. A simply mortal boy meeting a dangerous begin who really is a gentle soul looking for someone to spend its life with. Ayane says, she pulls out a handkerchief and wipes the tears building up in her eyes. That was appealing, sweetie, Inko says, wiping the tears from her eyes as well. Eri was the same as she was wiping her tears away as well. Izuku blushes and rubs the back of his head. T thanks mom and aunties. Izuku says, he feels something behind him and he turns to see a dark aura coursing off Pony and Reiko as they had twitching eyes and expressions of anger and, a hidden one as well. Are you, girls, alright? He asks. Yes, I am fine, Izuku. Reiko says. Yeah, why you a skin? Pony asks. Well, Rei-chan, the knives and forks are floating in the air above you, and Pachan, you've got a piece of the table in your hands. Izuku says. True to his words, there were knives and forks floating above Reiko's head, all aimed at someone with them, and Pony had actually broken a piece of the table with her bare hands. Applesauce, you've seriously got to control that strength of yours. You can easily break something or someone if you aren't careful. Caitlin says, hiccuping. Dear, don't play with sharp things with your powers. You'll hurt someone. Ayane says. That's the plan. Both girls thought in unison. They took deep breaths in, calming down. It took a little bit, but they eventually did as Reiko lowered the utensils back down to the table and Pony put the pieces of the broken table onto it. I apologize, Mother, I let my emotions take over. Reiko says. Sorry Ma, guess I got a little angry and lost it a bit. That's all. Pony says. The two glance back to Toru and flash a dark glare at her, which she didn't notice. But still, that's awfully sweet of you to do that, Izzy. And a little X-rated. Caitlin says, flashing a grin that spoke mischief, you sure you want her to just be your maid, or are you looking for something more? Like a little night play? I didn't think you for that type of kid. She says, causing Izuku to look at her, confused about what she meant until it came to his mind. He blushes madly and shakes his head at her. Auntie. It's not like at all. I just wanted to help her. Izuku stammers, trying to get his point across on his intentions, but Caitlin wasn't buying it. But you invited a girl, a dragon, but still a girl. To your house to live with you. There's got to be hidden things you want from. Are you trying to sneak into her pants? Caitlin asks, making Izuku's blush redden. Fortunately, Eri wasn't listening or paying any attention to the current conversation since Inko placed earphones on her and let her play with her phone. And no, there aren't. Besides, that's something I want. Izuku says, trying to hide from the embarrassment he was getting from his auntie. Ayane and Inko were giving Caitlin a look of disappointment for making Izuku get like this. But I want that. Everyone stopped and slowly turned to Toru, who had a look of seriousness. What? Caitlin uttered, after finding her voice after a bit. The others look at the dragon girl with stunned expressions. Yes, I want Izuku to love me. Because I love him with all my heart. So much that I want to have his kids. Toru says with a tone of conviction and love as she holds her red cheeks and lets out a goofy smile. No one spoke for a while as they were processing her words when. What? Pony and Reiko shout and shot up from their seats, shocked and hear that confession. Quiet. The manager of the restaurant yells, making the girls. Sorry. The girls say and sit back down. You serious? Aine asks. I am. Toru says, continuing with what she was doing. Caitlin looks at her for a while until she lets out a smile. I like this girl, she's blunt. Caitlin says with Aine agreeing, nodding along. Indeed. Aine says. While they were saying this on the outside. But on the inside was a different story. We seriously need to help our girls step up and claim Izuku before Toru does. The two mothers thought, making plans to help their daughters to claim the boy of their dreams. And the girls were having similar thoughts. I need to step up my hints before Toru takes Izuku/Izzy from me. I've already got Pony/Ray-chan as a love rival, I can't let another be in the running. I won't allow it. Pony and Reiko thought, glaring at Toru who, again wasn't aware of, as she was still holding her cheeks and smiling. The two then turn to each other and glare at one another before nodding. Letting each other know that, it's every woman for herself. Inko looked at the two and sees a certain look in their eyes, something she's seen and experienced before. Ah. I know that look. I've seen it from their mothers before when, they're in the mood. Looks like they've inherited it as well. Looks like I need to prepare Izuku before he gets jumped. Inko thought, preparing a list in her mind. Izuku feels a cold rush down his spine. Why do I feel like I'm being hunted? Izuku thought, feeling the cold rush return, as he felt dread was in his future which confused him. After that whole mess, the party paid for their meals and left the restaurant with Pony carrying her drunk passed-out mother on her back. Well, it was a lovely evening we had. Thank you for having us. Aine says with Inko just smiling and waving her hand. Oh please Aine. We always have a good time when we're all together. Inko says, Aine nods. Indeed. Aine says. She then remembers something. Oh, and Inko, are we still on for this Friday night? She asks. Of course. Inko says, ecstatically, since this Friday was the one night in the week she could go out with her friends and paint the town red. Izuku was with Pony and Reiko. Toru was with them, holding Eri's hand. Well, guess I'll see you girls tomorrow at school. Izuku says. Yep/indeed. Pony and Reiko say. Pony was about to turn and leave when she remembers what she wanted to say to him. Oh, and Izzy. I'm coming over to your house this Saturday to binge anime. Pony says, but Reiko turns to her. That's going to be an issue as Izuku will be taking me to the park this coming Saturday. Reiko says. Pony turns to Reiko with a challenging look. Oh really? Pony asks. Reiko sees the look and recuperated it. Yes, really. Reiko says. Lighting sparked in between their eyes as they glare at one another, hoping the other would back down, but it wasn't happening. Fortunately, Izuku intervened. You both can come over, I don't mind the company. Izuku says, causing the two to stop their stare-off and turn to him as their eyes slightly twitch, but they smile. Great. We'll be there. The two say. They weren't happy that the other one was coming since both wanted to be alone with Izuku, but this did give them the chance to not let Toru get any further with Izuku. After that, the three families said their goodbyes and departed their separate ways for home. Apartment complex, Mustafu, Tokyo, Japan. The Midoriya family, including Toru, returned back to their apartment and were ready for bed, especially with what happened today. Man, what a day. Izuku mutters. He was in his bed already and was ready to sleep away. He takes off his glasses and places them in a container next to his phone. He was about to tuck in when his room door gets knocked on, causing him to look at it. Come in. Izuku says. The door opens and in comes Toru, wearing a large green and white t-shirt that fitted her body well and ended just above her knees. Toru. What's up? He asks. Toru just closes the door behind her and looks at him. Well, I was wondering, if I can sleep with you. Toru asks, surprising Izuku. Really? Izuku asks, but I thought you said that dragons tend to not sleep for long periods. He says, remembering the conversation they had on where she would sleep on the first night she was there. I did, but I just thought that I could sleep with you always. Toru says, chirper. Izuku looks at her and sighs. Knowing that she wasn't going to leave. He moves to the left of his bed and opens the cover out and pets the empty side. Alright then, hop in. Izuku says. Toru smiles. Right. Toru says. She goes to the side and hops into the bed. Izuku takes a remote from the bedside stand and clicks a button and the lights turn off. Izuku lays down on his mattress and closes his eyes to sleep. Toru just had her eyes open and was looking at the ceiling for a bit. But she stops and turns to Izuku. Hey, Izuku. Toru says, causing Izuku to speak, even though he was close to falling asleep. Yeah. Izuku says. I really can't stop saying thank you to you. For letting me come and live with you and your family. Toru says. Izuku just shrugs. It was nothing. Just helping someone in need really. Izuku says. But still, you didn't have to. Toru says. I know. But I still did it. Anyone would have done the same. Izuku says Toru felt differently about that. Maybe, but no one is you. You did it. And, I'm forever grateful for that. Toru says. Her words caused Izuku to open his eyes and think about them. Was she right? Would anyone else help her out of the good of their heart, or just left her to die? Or worse, would have forced her to do things that she wouldn't want to? Izuku thought about it a bit more and just thanked fate for letting them meet. Yeah, maybe. Izuku says. He then lets out a yawn, now really feeling exhausted. Night, Toru. He says and closes his eyes. Night. Toru says. Toru hears Izuku slightly snore and knew he was out. She smiles and places her hand on his hair and plays with them a little bit, but stops as she decides that maybe she could sleep as well since she did need to sleep eventually. She closes her eyes and lets her mind drift away to what she hopes would be a pleasant dream. But she wasn't having any dreams. No, Toru was reliving memories from her past. Her recent past. She was reliving the battle she was involved in where she was trying to take on a kingdom and was battling against its army. She had incinerated most of the armada with her fire, but before she could go on to the castle, she was stabbed by the sword made by the god that was assisting the army. She felt the pain from the blade and saw the army was now closing in on her, ready to kill her. Toru gasps and opens her eyes. She looks around and sees that she was in Izuku's room, but she feels something wrapped around her. She looks and sees Izuku wrapped his arms around her in a protective manner. She looks at him and saw that he was still asleep, but he was protecting her. She smiles a little and wraps her arms and tail around Izuku, and she places her head on his chest and listens to his heart. It was soothing to her and she falls asleep, only this time, she doesn't have the same memories replaying. More like her flying in the air and holding hands with Izuku, who had wings of his own. Aldera Junior High, Mustafu Prefecture, Tokyo, Japan. 2 weeks later. 2 weeks have passed since the night Izuku told the tale of how he and Toru met and their daily lives were as they could possibly get in a world filled with quirks. Toru was slowly adjusting to her new home, learning everything she as a maid and as a student as she possibly could. There were some hiccups here and there, but all in all, everything was good. Well, at home it was. At school on the other hand, yeah, I'll just let the story explain. Izuku was at his desk, sitting there not really paying attention to all the noise his classmates were making as they were chatting to one another over useless CRP. He feels a tap on his shoulder and turns to see it was. He sees Pony, Reiko, and Toru, who was in her student disguise. Standing beside him. Hi, Izzy/Izuku. Pony and Reiko greet him. Hey, girls, what's up? Izuku asks, facing them. Did you hear about that attack at Tatooine Station earlier today? Pony asks. She had her phone out and shows the article involving said attack at the train station not that long ago. Oh yeah, I also heard about a villain attacking the train station while on my way here. Reiko says, she saw a live stream of the incident, a crappy stream but it did catch some decent moments. Yeah, I heard about it. We saw it in the air on the way here. Izuku says, surprising Pony and Reiko. Really? The two ask. Toru nods her head. Yep, we saw this big guy destroying the buildings around him. I thought he was a giant or a large orc but Izuku told me it was big with a variant of a giant quirk. And then this wood guy shows up and started beating him up. Toru yells, throwing a punch in the air, unintentionally causing a gush of wind to blow from it, and throughout the room, causing all the girls to grab their skirts. Huh? The two human girls utter, confused about what wood guy was Toru talking about, they turn to Izuku. She means Kamui Woods. Izuku explains, as the girls owed, understanding now. Yeah, and he was awesome kicking that big guy's butt. He was like bam. Pow. Smash. Toru yells making the sound effects while throwing a punch here and there in the air, once again causing gushes of wind to blow through the classroom, making the girls hold on to their skirts once more. It was great and we saw that he was about to win the fight when he was cut off by that giant woman. Giant woman? Pony asks, raising her eyebrow. She's talking about that new heroine that debuted today at the fight. Izuku says. Oh yeah. Her. She just came flying out of nowhere and kicked that guy in his face. Rude if you ask me since Kamui Woods had the thing taken care of. Pony says, crossing her arms and huffing, unintentionally making a cute face. Yeah, we only saw her come in with that kick but we didn't stick around for what happened since we still had to come here and just flew away. Toru says, right before she looks up, what's her name anyway? We never really got it since we were so high up in the air and the only thing we did here was. I believe her hero name is, Empty Lady. Right? Reiko asks, unsure of the name as the stream she watched the attack off from didn't have great sound quality. Pony takes out her phone and quickly looks up the. Yeah, I think that's it. Although. She looks like she's in this for the model side than the heroic side. Yeah, I can see that. Also, Izzy, has Toru been reading any of the manga I gave you? I sensing some vibes from her. Pony asks, making the green, glasses wearing, haired boy look at her and nod as he takes off his glasses. Why yeah, I caught her reading JJK the other day when I got home from the library. She's been reading a bunch of manga from my collection. And she's starting to enjoy them. Izuku says, rubbing his eyes. Pony slowly nods, understanding. I can see that. Pony says, looking at Toru, seeing her whistling innocently. Good, and after that, I'll introduce her to the wonderful world of memes. Reiko says, with Izuku looking at the pale gray-haired teen. Please don't. She just discovered TV and anime and she's been binge-watching stuff for days now. I can't even focus on reading without hearing an opening to a show. Izuku says. You can't stop me, Izuku-kun. You know nothing comes between me and memes. Reiko just says as she was smirking with Izuku just groaning, knowing that she would eventually show Toru memes, he just hoped that she wouldn't understand what they were and forget about them. Eventually, the homeroom teacher enters the class with the other students heading to their seats. Alright, listen up everyone. It is the right time for all of you to think about your future. The teacher says, walking to the front podium while holding a stack of paper. Now, I want all of you to turn in your career documents, but I think all of you have the ambition of becoming heroes, right? The entire class cheered as they began to show off their quirks, well except for 4. Izuku just sighs and looks out the window while Reiko and Pony roll their eyes at their peers using their quirks indoors, especially one of them shooting out fire with one of her fingers, while Toru was confused by everything. Idiots, they forget that there are laws that say you shouldn't use your quirks in class or school. Unless the school has a quirk allowance license, but seeing that this school doesn't have one, it's only a matter of time before someone screws up and gets everyone in trouble. Izuku thought, knowing the laws, thanks to his mom being one of Japan's best lawyers. As this continued, one voice scoffs loudly. Pfft, yeah right sensei. I don't believe for a second that I'm on the same level as all these cannon fodders here. A cocky, smug voice made the four roll their eyes and scoff while everyone else stops showing off and turns to the source of the voice, which was Bakugou, who had his foot on his desk while smirking smugly. I don't want to be seen on the same level as these extras with weak quirks. He says as he smirks at everyone, which doesn't sit well with the others. What's the big idea, Bakugou? You think you're better than us? I want to see you say that straight to my face. The students all start bombarding Bakugou with threats and jabs, feeling insulted and angry at calling them weak, fodders, and extras, like them, didn't matter. But Bakugou being Bakugou saw this as something else. Shut up, fodders. You want to go? Let's FGO. Bakugou shouts, lifting his hands up and releasing small sparks from his palms, shaking a bit as he was ready to fight if needed. The teacher on the other hand thought otherwise. All right. Settle down, all of you. Or there will be detention. The teacher yells, slamming his hand onto his podium, causing the students who were yelling and using their quirk to settle down and return to their seats. Calming down and clearing his throat, the teacher turns to Bakugou-kun. Ah yes, Bakugou-kun, I heard that you're applying for UA High School, right? The teacher says. Izuku and the girls stop at what they were doing as their attention was caught by that statement, which causes Bakugou to act even smugger as he heard the students whisper about UA. Dude, the best high school to go to if you want to go become a pro hero. One of the students whispers to his buddy next door, who was shocked beyond belief. Hey, I heard that it takes an average of 80% or more just to even apply for this year. Not to mention that the infamous entrance examination is the most difficult one too. Isn't that the school that some of the top heroes nowadays went to? Yeah, it is. Endeavor and All Might went there. DMN. Most of the students within the room mood dropped from anger to depression after the mention of the school. Instead of glaring at the blonde, some were nervous about UA while some were a bit scared about the situation. Bakugou smirks at the display of those extras as he stands up from his desk. I'm not even surprised that all of you cower at the mention of UA. I will surpass All Might, be the #1 hero, become the richest hoer ever, and have my name inscribed as the greatest hero that the world has ever known. Bakugou shouts, grinning proudly at himself. Izuku and the girls just sigh and ignore Bakugou and his big talk as they mind their business as usual. The teacher peeked at Bakugou's declaration as he looks at the registry of applications and sees something quite interesting. Well, Bakugou-kun, you might have completion. Because if I'm right, Midoriya, Yanagi, Tsunori, and Midoriya are all applying to UA as well. The rest turn to look at the trio, which causes them to look at their classmates with curious expressions on their faces before their expression changes to laughter. Seriously. Those four. Them going to UA. Now that's a joke. Mad, the girls, they might have a chance, but Midoriya? Not a chance. I doubt that the girls have a chance. I mean, they hang around Deku most of the time. Yeah, so, shouldn't that tell us that they're weak as hell? Everyone was laughing, thinking that none of the four would end up failing. Some thought the girls could do it while Deku would fail, and hopefully that would make the girls see that he was nothing but deadweight to them. Others really didn't say or think anything since this had nothing to do with them or their futures, so, they kept to themselves. But one student, in particular, had other ideas in his mind upon hearing that from the teacher. Hey, DKU you nerd. Bakugou jumps from his desk straight towards Izuku. Izuku turns and sees Bakugou coming toward him and sees that he had his palm open and it was glowing red. He closes his eyes and prepares to rake whatever was coming, only to hear an loud impact on skin and a slam onto the floor. Izuku slowly opens his eyes and sees Bakugou wasn't in the air, soaring toward him anymore, but was on the floor with a bruised cheek as Toru was pinning him down to the floor by holding onto his neck with one hand and holding his wrists with the other. "What do you think you're doing?" Toru asks slowly, her eyes glowing. "Beach. What makes you think that you, those hussies of friends for yours, and that nerd can insult me by thinking that you're on the same level as me and apply to UA?" The explosive boy yelled. Izuku's eyebrow twitches from the hussy comment as he looks at him in the eyes with slight anger in them. He lets out a sigh and looks at the sandy-ash blonde-haired boy with a look of disdain. "Bakugou, I don't know if you know this, but UA recently removed the Quirkless Act. 1059 of 2200. Izuku says. Bakugou looks over Toru and at Izuku and glares at him. "What the F is that stupid act and what does it have to do with this?" Bakugou yells, trying to pry off from Toru's grip but couldn't due to her being stronger than him. Izuku lets out a sigh and looks at him. "It means that people who are quirkless or have weak class quirks can entry into UA through their entrance exams and apply to their various courses, including the heroics course." Izuku explains as Bakugou looks at him in shock at the new information he didn't know about before. That shock turns into anger as he resumes trying to get, "Now, I don't know why you feel that we've so-called insulted you by applying to UA, but we don't care. You don't boss us with our lives, and if you do, I won't listen to you," he says, with boredom as Bakugou looks at him and growls. "And listen here you little dash," Bakugou was saying, but before he could continue what he was saying, the teacher interrupts him. "Alright, that is enough," the teacher yells, slamming his hands once again onto the podium, startling some of the students as he looks at Toru and Bakugou with stern expressions. "Midoriya-chan, please release Bakugou and back away from him, and Bakugou-kun, you will return to your seat this instant," he says. Toru just looks at the teacher for a bit before turning to Izuku, who looks at her for a bit before reluctantly nodding at her, signaling her to do as told as she lets out a heavy sigh and looks down at Bakugou and gives him an intimidating glare, daring him to do something as she releases her grip onto his neck and wrists. Bakugou lets out a series of small coughs before he stands up and glares angrily at Izuku. "This isn't over, Deku. Not by a long shot," Bakugou whispers at the boy before she turns around, proceeding and walking back to his desk. Izuku just sighs and shakes his head. "Knowing you and your ego, I know that you're not done with us," Izuku thought, knowing that Bakugou keeps his promises and will come back at him. So, he just puts that in the back of his head and listens to his teacher as he starts the morning lesson. Somewhere in a shopping district, Mustafu Prefecture, Tokyo. Somewhere else in the Mustafu Prefecture, people were busy spending their time in a shopping district, buying various food items or lunch when chaos erupts. "Someone help, stop that thief!" Someone yells as a pile of gooey sludge with eyes in the shape of eggs and sharp teeth slinked away, carrying severely stolen goods in its body. "You can't catch me!" This sludge thief yells while laughing with his voice as gross as his appearance as people begin to panic and scatter away from the scene for protection while knocking over things such as tables, signs, and some other people. "Someone is coming to help us, right? There's no end to people like him. Sludge. Please, are there any heroes nearby? Save us." People scream for help or were running away as the sludge villain continues to wreak havoc in the shopping district while taking money and other valuable items from the stores and fallen bags. Someone was there and had seen the villain and his chaos and decided to act. Ha 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 ha. No need to feel fear, citizens. There is indeed an end to scum like him because I am here. Shouted a loud, heroic voice. Everyone stopped and turned to where the voice was and their eyes widened in surprise. "Look there. No way. That can't be him. Is that The villain had heard the voice and stopped as it was trembling as it had recognized the voice well. It slowly turns around to where the source of the voice. No. Not you. Anyone else but you. The sludge villain shouts, fear feeling into his wet body as the person in front of him smiles. Prepare yourself, villain. For justice has come, to deal with you. The person yells before he rushes toward the villain with a raised fist. Aldera Junior High, Mustafu Prefecture, Tokyo, Japan. The end of the school day. The last class of the day had ended and everyone was on their way to do their own things in the city, heading home or having remained in the building for their school club activities. As the students were leaving their homerooms, Izuku and the girls were still inside, packing their things so they could head home. Izuku was packing his bag as Pony approaches him. Hey, Izzy. Pony calls to him, gaining his attention as he turns to her. Yeah, Pony-chan. What's up? Izuku asks and he sees her start rubbing her arm and looking away. Do you want to go to a cafe together? It's the latest one in the city, it's an anime/hero one. Pony. Oh, wow. I'm flattered by the offer, Pony, but Izuku was saying, but Reiko cuts in, literally as she steps in between the two and looks at him. Izuku, perhaps you could come to my house and watch some videos on ghost hunting. Reiko asks, looking at him in his eyes. Pony was behind Reiko and was angrily pouting at her. Well, you know I would, but Izuku was trying to speak once more but gets cut off again. Hey, Rei-chan. You cut in on our conversation. I was asking Izzy if you would go to a cafe with me. Pony yells, looking at Reiko with a pouty glare. Pony-chan. Izuku was saying, but again, gets cut off. I know, I was listening in, but I feel that he would be more interested in the videos I have saved. Reiko says, not intimidated by the glare she was receiving. Rei-chan. Izuku says, trying to defuse the situation that was unfolding in front of him, but the two girls don't pay any attention to him but to each other. No, he wouldn't. He'd love to eat at the cafe with me. Pony yells. Girls. Izuku says, still trying to defuse the situation. I believe that to be false since Izuku and I love those types of videos. Reiko says. Girls. That is total bullcrap and you know it. He loves watching anime with me. Pony says. That is false once again. Reiko says. Girls. Izuku was on his last straw. Oh really, Miss Gloom? And how do you know that? Pony says, but in English, as she glares at the pale gray-haired girl who returns the glare. First off, don't think I can't understand you when you go to your native tongue. Second of all, if you ever call me that again, I'll toss ye out of that window ye lil bampot one, so, awa, en bile your hide too. Reiko looked a bit annoyed as she spoke but with an accent that both Izuku and Pony knew too well. Why was she doing this? Oh, is that so? Pony asks, getting up close. So. Reiko says, looking down at the short girl. Girls. Izuku shouts, completely startling the two girls as they turn to him and see his left eye twitching in annoyance. Finally. I have been trying to get your attention. God, you girls always do this. He says, sighing as he runs his hand through his hair. Pony and Reiko actually felt embarrassed about the way they were acting toward one another as Izuku looks at them with an apologetic expression. Sorry girls, but I can't do either one of those things today. My mom invited some guests over for dinner to introduce Toru to them and asked me to go into town and pick up some stuff for the dinner. He says, looking at the two as their eyes widen in surprise. Oh. The two utter, now seeing they were taking things out of hand when Izuku couldn't come with either one of them. Right, sorry. They say, rubbing their arms. It's fine, you couldn't have known about it either way. But we can do those things later in the week. Izuku says, and Pony and Reiko peel at this. Really? The two say with Izuku nodding. Yeah, all four of us. Me, you girls, and Toru. Izuku says, letting out a smile as he closes his eyes. Due to this, he misses the dark look the two girls had gained upon hearing. Yeah, that's great. Pony says, with a forced smile. Yes, indeed it is. Reiko says, mirroring the smile Pony had. That was their dialogue outside, in their minds was another tale. Dajimit/curses. Why might she always be included in any activities me and Izu/Izzy do? And why should Toru come along as well? The two thought, annoyed by the fact that either one was going to join in on their date, that they wanted to go with him, but that was out the window once Izuku wanted them to hang out together, and to make matter worse, he included Toru into things, making it harder of them to get some alone time with him. Okay then. I'll see you, girls, later. Izuku asks, knowing that they call him later on Discord. Yes. The two say together, but their voices sounded a bit strained. Cool, bye guys. Izuku says. Bye/farewell. Pony and Reiko say, as they take their bags and proceed in leaving the classroom together. While walking side by side, they glare at one another with such intensity that you can partly see lighting sparking in between their faces. Once they left the room, Izuku turns back to his bag and resumes his packing. Toru walks up to him. Hey, Izuku. Toru calls to the boy. Yes. Izuku says, turning to her. What was up with Reiko's voice there? It sounded a bit rougher than her normal tone. Toru asks. Izuku realizes what she was talking about. Oh, it's nothing to worry about, that was just her going into either rage/annoyed mode and using her Scottish accent. Izuku says, turning back to his bag and packing in the last items into it as Toru looks at him, more confused than previously. Huh? Toru utters, raising one of her brows in confusion. What Scottish? She asks. Izuku packs in his pencil case and turns back to her. It's an ethnic group and nation natives to Scotland, a country somewhere else in the world. Her father is originally from that country while her mother is Japanese and from here, so she's half Scottish, half Japanese. She inherited her father's speech patterns when she was younger while she lived in Scotland for a bit before moving here due to her mother's occupation. I can remember the first time I heard her accent. Izuku says, smiling and looking up as he was reminiscing back to the day he and the others were at Reiko's house and were watching an old Western horror movie about a clown taking kids away in the sewers. One scene in practical frightened to the point where Reiko started screaming in utter gibberish that Izuku and Pony couldn't understand until the pale gray-haired girl calmed down and explained what had happened. The two swore that they'd never make fun of her and his accent as she was afraid about others finding out about it and laughing at her for it. There were times back in their childhood and nowadays when Reiko slips and goes full Scottish and goes into a cuss storm when angered or annoyed. Pony was the same but in American English, and only they, and their families could understand what she spoke. Oh. I understand now. It's like a warlock chanting out curses upon his enemies. Toru says, with Izuku blinking at her after that example. Sort of. But yeah, just like that. Izuku says after processing and taking the last item off his desk, a notebook, and was about to put it in his book when a hand snitches it out from his hands. And where do you think you're going, Deku? A voice speaks as the two look up and see Bakugou with two of his friends next to him with the blonde holding the notebook in his hands. I said we're not done talking. So, let's talk. He says as Izuku sighs in frustration to himself for not leaving sooner. Bakugou, can we not do this today? I've got things to do. So, just give me back my stuff and let me leave. Izuku says. Oh, hear that? Deku doesn't want to talk to us. One of the friends says with a mocking intimidated voice. What the hell is this? Bakugou asks, talking about the notebook in his hands. He looks at it and sees its title. Hero Analysis for the Future number 13. He reads out the title as his two friends laugh at the name. Don't tell me you're taking notes on how to be a hero? Bakugou asks, smirking at Izuku. Yeah. Really pathetic. Hey, give that back to him. Shut it, Beach. Bakugou yells at Toru. He looks back at the notebook and does something Izuku and Toru weren't expecting. He blows it up in his hands and tosses it out the open window behind him. Izuku runs to the window and looks down to see where the book had landed and saw it had landed in a pond just outside the side of the building. Izuku turns around and faces Bakugou as he glares angrily at him. What the hell, Bakugou? Izuku shouts while Bakugou ignores his shouting. Listen, Deku, the top pros all over the world come from shitty backgrounds and rise to the top of the mountain as number one. And I plan on doing the same when I go pro after getting into UA. They'll know I'm legit and good. That's not my ego talking, I'm just that DMN good. Bakugou says with a smirk, as if he was right about what he was saying. Yeah, right. Izuku thought, with a deadpan expression, not ever intimidated by Bakugou's words while he was still pissed at him for what he did. Ego much? Friend, one thought with a sweat drop running down the side of his head. Cocky much? Friend, two thought, mirroring his friend with his sweat drop. Geez, and I. Thought Drake, Albino, and Bahamut were egotistic, but this human, somehow puts theirs to shame. Toru thought, remembering the 3 dragons who she fought along and against in the past. They were prideful and cocky, but seeing this human in front of her had a larger ego and pride that those 3 combined, and theirs were large than this city. So, here's some advice for you. Bakugou says, placing his hand on Izuku's shoulder and gives the glasses-wearing boy a friendly smile. You, this beach, and those other beaches you call friends don't apply to UA or else. He says, igniting a small explosion on Izuku's shoulder, trying to prove a point to him on what would happen if he didn't. But to his surprise, Izuku didn't flinch at the explosion or at his words as he stares at Bakugou with a dead look. Okay. So, I won't listen to that advice, so you can take it and shove it elsewhere, and I'll continue on my way. Thank you, gentlemen, and goodbye. Izuku says as he pushes Bakugou's hand and walks away from the 3 while talking his bag along and starts making his way to the exit with Toru following close behind. Bakugou grits his teeth after seeing Izuku wasn't even intimidated by the advice and was going to continue with his application to UA. He had to do something to stop him and the others from doing it so he could be the only one from this crappy school to go to UA, and then the rest would be easy. He then gains a thought and smirks as he turns to Izuku and Toru. You know, if you really want to be a hero that badly, there actually might be another way. Bakugou says as Izuku and Toru stop walking to the door and turn back around to the 3 as Bakugou just says something so inhuman. Just pray you'll be born with a quirk in your next life and take a swan dive off the roof of the building. He says with a nonchalant tone as he closes his eyes and smiles. Not noticing the horrified expressions of his friends, Izuku and Toru as they look at him in shock and horror at what they just heard and how he spoke. Izuku's bangs lower and start shadowing his eyes as he looks down and clenches his fists. What did you just say? Izuku asks slowly as a dark aura started to form around him with Bakugou opening his eyes and looking at him. Huh? Didn't you hear me? I said, take a swan dive and GAH. Bakugou was saying, but he unexpectedly gets interrupted when Izuku rushed at him and delivered a heavy punch to his gut, knocking the wind out of him. Just before he could process what just happened, he suddenly gets flipped through the air and slams onto the strong floor back first, causing him to gasp out for air and let some of his spit to fly out as he is then pinned to the floor by a foot and his arm held out in the air by Izuku in a hold. What the F is wrong with you? Did you seriously just suicide bait me? You stupid F trash. Izuku yells as he delivers a kick onto Bakugou's abdomen, causing the blonde to groan from the hit as Izuku continues to pin him down. Don't you ever say SHT like that to me again or to anyone else, and if I do hear that you did said that to someone else or in front of me again, I swear to God, I will smash your face into a car windshield, then take you to the curb, place your teeth onto said curb and stomp your head into it, and then burn your body into ashes, turn your ashes into a vinyl record and play you while I make my sister dinner. Do I make myself clear? He shouts, glaring at the boy below his foot. Bakugou moves his head to look at Izuku and glares straight at him. Listen here you little dash, Bakugou was trying to speak but a foot planted into the side of his ribs, causing him to cry out in pain while Izuku twists his arm, not to the point where he'd break it, but close to it if he pushes him further. I asked you if I made myself clear. Izuku shouts, twisting the arm a bit more, to an angle that it wasn't supposed to be in, which causes Bakugou to cry out further. Why yes. Bakugou yells, biting back a yelp of pain as Izuku releases him and moves away while Bakugou lets out a series of coughs when Izuku removed his foot. Good. Izuku says. He cleans himself off and looks back at the blonde one more time. Don't say SHT like that again, or I will destroy you. Izuku says, letting the threat hang in the air as he processes back leaving the room. Bakugou slowly recovers as he sits up and rolls his arm, trying to get the pain to fade away. He glances back at Izuku's back, seeing it move further away from him, and he grits his teeth in anger. How dare that nerd do that to me, Katsuki Bakugou, the next #1 hero. Bakugou thought, he was angry that the fact that Izuku had him beaten and pinned to the floor, and doing so with little effect. This would not stand with him. Looking back at the nerd, he sees that Izuku was close to the door and was about to leave. He suddenly gains an idea and grins at the thought of it. This will put the nerd back in his rightful place. Under my shoes. He thought. He gets up and places his arms behind him as small explosions go off from his palms. He ignites one large one and takes off soaring toward Izuku. He places one of his hands in front of him and aims at Izuku with the palm glowing brightly, indicating that he was about to let out an attack. Die, UF little GAH. Bakugou was yelling as he was about to let the attack out, but he gets clotheslined out of nowhere by Toru, which sends him flying back to where he originally was and hits his head on the side of the desk and lands on the floor strong. The two friends looked shocked and looked at Toru, who had the meanest glare they had ever seen in their entire lives. Don't touch him again, or else you'll lose that hand of yours and see if you blow things up again with one hand. Toru says, letting her own threat hang as she turns around and follows Izuku as the two exit the room, leaving the room. The two friends just stand there in shock for a bit while Bakugou was recovering from the clothesline as the two turn to each other. Dude, since when can Deku fight? Friend #1 asks as friend #2 just shakes his head and shrugs after a while. I don't know, and I rather never know. Friend #2 says, feeling a bit of relief that he wasn't the victim of Toru's wrath this time since his back hadn't fully recovered yet from the last time. Friend #1 looks down and sees Bakugou crawling on the floor, trying to regain his bearings, and he only had one thing to say. Bakugou, dude. You got knocked the F out. Friend #1 says. Bakugou just collapses back to the ground and turns to his friend, and gives him a glare. Shut up fingers. Bakugou yells before he groans from the pain. Not that far from Aldera Junior High. Izuku and Toru were not that far from the school as they walked down a street to the train station after they had retrieved Izuku's now burnt notebook from a fish pond. While they walk, Izuku was frowning and grumbles as he stares at his ruined notebook, thinking about what Bakugou had told him to do if he wanted a quirk. That F guy. Who that hell does he think he is to say something that mess to me, to AF human being like him? Who gave him the right to say SHT like that or treat me like he has for the last 10 years? Izuku thought, eyebrow twitching in anger. Toru looks at him and sees the expression he had. Izuku. Toru calls out to him, as she was about to place her hand on his shoulder, but before she could, Izuku turns to her and glares at her. What? Izuku shouts, angrily as Toru flinches and retracts her hand. In fear. Izuku sees Toru was frightened and he realizes that he shouted at her for no reason and felt bad for it. Oh, man. Toru, I'm so sorry for shouting at you. I shouldn't have. He says in a sincere tone, with Toru seeing he meant it and nods. It's fine. I'm just worried about you. Toru says, looking worried as she turns to him. Are you okay? She asks, placing her hand on his shoulder as Izuku just lets out a sigh and shakes his head. No, I'm not. I'm so mad right now. Izuku yells, grabbing his hair. About what that human said to you if you wanted a power? Toru asks, knowing why as Izuku nods and lets go of his hair. Yes, that guy, I don't even recognize him anymore. I don't know what happened, but he's not the same guy I have known most of my life. Izuku says, sighing with Toru looking at him in disbelief. What? Toru asks and Izuku just nods. Believe it or not, that guy was a decent person when we were younger. Sure he was arrogant and a bit of a JRK but he was my friend, the only one I can relate to, but he got his quirk, and he started to change, letting get to him to the point that he thinks he's the best ever at anything really. That guy is an extreme perfectionist tenfold, he wants everything perfect for his so-called origin and wanted to be the ever best. I don't know what's going on in his head but he has to know that he can't be the best at everything, eventually, he'll see that he isn't good at something, Izuku says, looking up to the sky as he reminisces of the days he played with a younger Bakugou before he got his quirk and let it go to his mind. Sure he had Pony and Reiko but sometimes, he wondered if he also got a quirk and Bakugou wasn't a JRK. Would things have been different? I know that all too well. Toru says, Izuku turns and sees she had a somber expression. Power corrupts everything and anyone who lets it go to their heads and hearts, and anything they touch it's like liquor, once you had that bottle, it becomes harder for you to put it down, but once you pass that point, it will consume you and your soul and that will be nothing for you left, only that power you let into your mind and soul. Toru says, with a serious tone and expression, remembering all those she knew what was it like to die from power or seek additional power. Izuku looks at her with shock, not expecting to hear that from her. Wow, that's really deep Toru. Izuku says, Toru just shrugs her shoulders and smiles. I have a friend who used to drink a lot, up until she had an accident that cost her title as a god. Toru says. A god? There are dragon gods? Izuku asks. Sort of. But that's something for her to tell you someday. Maybe I should give her a call and see how she is. Toru says, thinking about how her friends were doing. Maybe you should. Who knows, maybe they miss you. Izuku says with Toru just shrugging her shoulders again. Maybe. Toru says. The two continue walking down the sidewalk for a bit until they come across a path that was near them, one the Izuku was familiar with. Hey, let's cut through here. It's a shortcut that'll get us closer to the shopping district a lot faster. Izuku says and Toru nods. K. Toru says. The two turn and walk down the shortcut. After a bit, they come up to a small bridge and start walking under it, passing a manhole cover. Unaware that they passed it, the manhole cover slowly opens up and two egg-like red eyes look through the hole and spot them. Yes. Something to use to hide from him. This thing thought before shooting out of the manhole cover to reveal itself as the sludge villain from earlier. It attacks the two as they turn just to see it and swats Toru out of the way as she hits the side of the bridge while taking Izuku and pulling him into its slime body. Finally. A meat suit to hide in. The sludge villain yells with glee. Izuku starts trying to pry the slime off of his body. Hey. Get off of me. Izuku yells, prying off some of the slime before the arm he was using gets restrained by a tendril of slime as the sludge villain starts putting its body into Izuku's mouth, causing the boy to start suffocating and choke. Grab all you want kid, my body's made of fluid, meaning you can't grab any solid on me. This will be over in a bit, so stop fighting it and let it happen. The sludge villain yells, continuing in trying to take over Izuku's body with the boy fighting it off. Toru quickly recuperates from the swat and sees what was happening to Izuku. Her pupils dilate to that of a reptile's or a dragon with her teeth sharpening. Get off of him! Toru shouts, before shooting toward the villain with her fist raised. The villain turns and sees Toru heading toward them and laughs in seeing her fist in the air. Sorry girlie, but I need your friend's body to hide. If you stay quiet, then maybe I won't kill you and dash. That was what the sludge villain was saying, but he couldn't finish as Toru's fist connects to its body, causing it to explode and spatter all over the area from the force of the attack. When the slime imploded, Izuku was in the air for a bit before he starts to fall, but before he could hit the ground, he was fortunate enough for Toru to catch him. She lowers him to the floor and looks at him. Izuku. Are you alright? Toru asks, worried for the boy as he lets out a series of coughs. Cough cough, why yeah, I'm fine. Izuku utters, taking in deep breaths as Toru sighs for relief. Oh, thank goodness. Toru says, smiling. Before they say or do anything else, the manhole cover opens up again with something large jumping out from it, altering the two as Toru stands in front of Izuku for his protection. Fear not, citizens. Hope has arrived. A loud voice yells as the two see a very large man, with an equally muscular and well-defined physique. He has chiseled features on his face with a strong jawline, pronounced cheekbones, and bushy blonde eyebrows. He has short blonde hair, swept backward with two distinct tufts that stuck up above his head, leaning slightly to each side. His strong features were casting a dark shadow over his face, hiding everything but his bright blue eyes. He wore a simple white t-shirt with green pants and brown boots and a belt with a silver belt buckle. He also had this bright big smile. Upon seeing this man, Izuku's eyes nearly popped from their sockets, and almost dropped his glasses as he recognizes this man. And no way, it can't be. Izuku utters in shock, not believing what he was seeing. Toru on the other hand, was tense as she could feel the power coming from this man and immediately took him as a threat to her and to Izuku. Oh, no you don't. Toru shouts, charging toward the man, raising her hand, and makes a fist to hit this man with. Izuku snaps out of his shocked state when he saw Toru charge toward the man and saw she had a fist. Wait! Toru! Stop! Izuku yells, causing Toru to halt in her spot just as she was about to hit the man. She turns to him with a confused expression. Toru says. Don't attack him. He's a pro hero. He's the #1 hero for Japan. He's All Might. Izuku yells, with Toru looking at him. All Might? Toru asks, turning back to the man who just smiles further and laughs. Ha ha ha. Yes, it's me. All Might. The man, now known as All Might, says as he flexes his arms, causing a gush of wind to blow through the area, flapping both Izuku's and Toru's hair. I can't believe, you're him. You really are All Might. Izuku utters, still in a state of shock at seeing the #1 hero in front of him. The hero in question simply laughs as he sees Izuku's expression. Ha ha ha, it's always nice to meet. But I'm in the middle of stopping a villain who was terrorizing Uzumaki shopping district. I was pursuing him through the city and in the sewers when he gave me the slip and I had to track him to here where I saw the manhole cover was slightly open. Do you know where he went? All Might asks. You mean this guy? Toru asks, pointing to the wall as All Might turns and sees a large slime spattered on the wall. Soon, he took notice of the area and see most of it was covered in the slime. Ah! I see that you've already stopped me. Nice work, kids. All Might says, throwing a thumbs up to the two before looking at them with a serious look. Normally, I'd have you both arrested for the use of your quirk, but since only the three of us here and there isn't any damage to the area or bridge whatsoever, I'll keep this a secret and let you two off with a warning. He says. Alright. The two yells. Now, will you help me gather up the villain and place him in these bottles? All Might says, pulling out 2 plastic bottles from his pants pockets. Sure. Izuku and Toru say as they help All Might gather up the unconcise villain. It took some time due to the villain's slimy body slipping through their hands and fingers, but they were able to place him in the bottles with both of his eyes in each one, with stars spinning in them. Thank you too for your help. I much appreciate it. All Might says, smiling as he places the bottles into his pockets. It was no problem, All Might. Really? Izuku says, smiling at the man. Yeah, it was no big deal. Toru says, shrugging. Welp, I've gotta get going. Need to get this guy to the police so they can take care of him. All Might says, patting the bottles. He turns around and crouches down as he prepares for a leap. Izuku sees this and panics. Wait. I've got a lot to ask him. I can't let him go now. Izuku says and decides to do something, quite stupid really. I must go now. Evil doesn't stop for anyone. All Might says before he jumps in the air, soaring up in a single bound. Goodbye, young ones. Remember to be safe. He yells, disappearing into the clouds. Back on the ground, Toru had to shield her eyes from the winds as she sees All Might disappear in the clouds and was slightly impressed. Okay, I'll admit. For a human, he does look and feel powerful. I can see why you like him, Izuku. Toru says to Izuku, however she didn't get a response from her MSTR, which confused her. Izuku? She calls to him as she turns to where he was but is shocked as she sees that he wasn't there anymore. Izuku. Where are you? Where did you go? Toru yells. She starts to frantically look for Izuku, wondering where did he go to. In the skies, All Might was soaring above the buildings when he notices something wrong. Huh. All Might hums, feeling something was dragging him down a bit on his right leg. He looks down and sees Izuku had latched onto his leg. His eyes and mouth were flapping wildly in the wind while his glasses were somehow on his face. Hey. Let go. I love my fans and all, but this is too much. He says, trying to pry Izuku off from his leg, but the boy clanged onto the limb. No way, man. If I let go, I'll die. Izuku yells, causing All Might to stop and think for a moment. Oh, that's a good point. All Might says. I just want to ask you some questions. Something really important. You're my favorite hero of all time, All Might, the first in my top 10 list in Japan. So, please, let me ask you this question. Izuku yells. After hearing that, All Might couldn't help but sigh. Fans. Alright. I get it. Just, be quiet and close your eyes and mouth. We don't want people below to notice us. All Might says as he looks for a building to land on, but he lets out a cough as blood was leaking past his teeth, sht. He thought. As the two flew through the air, they had not noticed that the 2 bottles that held the sludge villain had fallen out of All Might's pocket and were falling down a part of the city. Down below the city, Bakugou and his 2 friends were walking down an alley as Bakugou was holding his head with a can of soda. Dude, that was rough. Friend number 1 says as he turns to Bakugou and sees him grumbling something under his breath. Weren't you and Midoriya good friends back when you were kids? He asks. Yeah, I mean, you were a lot harsher to him than before. Friend number 2 says as. So what? He's nothing more than a pebble in my path to be number 1. It's his fault for getting in my way. And how is it? The guy wants to be a hero. How is that getting in your way? All he did was mind his business and hang out with his friends while you go out of your own way and belittle for dreaming. If anything, you're the one who gets in his way just so you can beat him up. Friend number 2 says. Shut up. Bakugo roars as he kicks 2 bottles in the air as they soar out of the alley and into the streets as someone was passing by the entrance to the alley. Back in the alley, Bakugo turns back to this friend and glares at him. It's his fault for dreaming something that is impossible for someone like him. Someone has to teach that worthless nerd how the world really works, and put him in his rightful place in the world. As a worthless nobody. He shouts as friend number 2 glares at him. Oh, and telling him to kill himself is putting him in this so-called place? That's really heroic of you, Bakugo. Real heroic. Friend number 2 says with sarcasm, something Bakugo quickly catches and stands up to the taller teen. Oh, what's this all about? Do you like the nerd now? Bakugo asks the teen who just scoffs. No, I don't like him, but I'm not going to tell someone to go and off themselves just because I don't like them. That's F up on all levels and it's heartless. Friend number 2 says. Bakugo was getting angry and was about to do something when he gets cut off. Hey! The 3 turn and see a girl their age in her school uniform entering the alleyway, holding the 2 bottles in hand while having an enraged expression as she glares at them. What? Bakugo yells at this girl. Are you the one who kicked this? This girl shouts, holding out the bottles at them. Yeah. So. Bakugo yells. You but. This hit me on the head when I was walking by this alley. The girl shouts as she tosses the bottles to Bakugo, who uses his quirk and blows the bottles up to the side as he glares at the girl. You beach. How dare you throw SHT at me? Why I dash, Bakugo was about yell and do something when they all hear something on the side, something bubbling as if water was gathering together. They look and see slime gathering and building itself up. Where am I? The slime asks as it shakes its head, regaining its bearing as it looks around and sees that it was in an alleyway. He suddenly, that beach. I almost had the perfect meat suit to hide in, but she had to go and punch me and send my body all over the place. Oh, if ever see her again, I'll dash, the sludge was saying before its eyes spot something out of its view. It turns and sees the 4 teens looking at it with fear coming from the 2 friends, while anxiousness. Maybe that moment was lucky, 'cause I just found myself new meat suits to wear. The villain says with glee, before it jumps at the teens with Bakugo's friends jumping out of the way and fleeing the alley in fear while Bakugo and the girl were captured by the villain. Back with Izuku. So, that's why I wanted to ask, do you think that a quirkless person can become a hero? Izuku asks, talking to All Might as they were on top of a building, having landed there to talk. The thing was, Izuku was talking to All Might, but he was different from what we had seen before. For some reason, All Might was now a very skinny man with sharp, angular features and long limbs, his neck long and his eyebrows absent while his hair was messy as the tufts were now hanging down his face acting as bangs. The clothes he wore were baggy compared to how fitting they were before. He had explained the reason as to why he was like this to Izuku after they had landed on the building top and after he puffed into this state. All Might had this pondering expression, thinking about the question Izuku had asked him after hearing all the things he had said about him and his dream of becoming a pro-hero. After a while of thinking, he makes up his mind and looks at the young man. Do you want my honest opinion regarding the question? All Might asks as Izuku looks at him nervously. Why yes. Izuku utters nervously, preparing himself and hearing the answer. Can a quirkless person become a hero? My answer is, yes. I do. All Might say with Izuku letting out a sigh and looking down. I see, sorry to have wasted your time, Izuku was saying, but he stops when his mind finally processed what All Might had said. He looks up to, what? He stutters as All Might looks at him and nods. I said yes. I do believe that a quirkless person can be a hero. All Might say, he leans onto the railing of the stairs and looks at Izuku. I mean, take a look back in time, the bravest people on the planet had no special gifts like super strength, flight, being able to breathe underwater. No, all they had were their bodies, minds, and courage in dealing with danger and protect those in need. Those people were the police, firefighters, doctors, and those in the militia. Trust me, kid, I've been for so many years. I've seen heroes come and go, most quit when the job gets too strong or die in the line of duty. But of all the heroes I've had the pleasure of meeting and working alongside, I can confidentially say that only a handful of them are real heroes. You want to know why? He asks. Why? Izuku asks, wanting to know the reason. Because, they had that one moment. That one moment where they prove to themselves and to others and do something important, saving those in need, regardless of what would happen to their own bodies or lives. To save someone who needs saving. That moment to prove to themselves that they are heroes, by stepping up and protecting everything and everyone they love and treasure. I meant by what I said, anyone can become a hero. It's only you have to find that moment and take it. All Might says, looking at the young man in front of him. Izuku had listened to the words spoken by All Might and couldn't be helped but to be awestruck by them. Wow, that was. Izuku was saying as he tries in finding the right words to describe what the speech felt, and fortunately, All Might had the answer. Deep, and inspirational. Yeah, I know. My MSTR told me this once when I was younger. These words have been in my mind ever since. All Might says, with a smile on his face as he starts to reminisce about his early days. Wow. This MSTR for yours had to be an amazing person. Izuku says, seeing the smile on his hero's face and could see how genuine it was. She was. All Might says after a bit. Izuku looks at him for a bit and couldn't help but ask. Okay, for my next question. What happened to you? Why are you like, well, this? Izuku asks, gesturing to All Might's current state. The pro sighs and knew that this question was going to pop up eventually. Well, for that kid, is a long story. All Might says, making himself comfortable, he was saying the story but he suddenly gets cut off by an explosion. The two turn and see the city in search of where the explosion went off. I said yes. I do believe that a quirkless person can be a hero. All Might say, he leans onto the railing of the stairs and looks at Izuku. I mean, take a look back in time. The bravest people on the planet had no special gifts like super strength, flight, being able to breathe underwater. No, all they had were their bodies, minds, and courage in dealing with danger and protect those in need. Those people were the police, firefighters, doctors, and those in the militia. Trust me, kid, I've been for so many years. I've seen heroes come and go, most quit when the job gets too strong or die in the line of duty. But of all the heroes I've had the pleasure of meeting and working alongside, I can confidentially say that only a handful of them are real heroes. You want to know why? He asks. Why? Izuku asks, wanting to know the reason. Because, they had that one moment. That one moment where they prove to themselves and to others and do something important, saving those in need, regardless of what would happen to their own bodies or lives. To save someone who needs saving. That moment to prove to themselves that they are heroes, by stepping up and protecting everything and everyone they love and treasure. I meant by what I said, anyone can become a hero. It's only you have to find that moment and take it. All Might says, looking at the young man in front of him. Izuku had listened to the words spoken by All Might and couldn't be helped but to be awestruck by them. Wow, that was. Izuku was saying as he tries in finding the right words to describe what the speech felt, and fortunately, All Might had the answer. Deep, and inspirational. Yeah, I know. My MSTR told me this once when I was younger. These words have been in my mind ever since. All Might says, with a smile on his face as he starts to reminisce about his early days. Wow. This MSTR for yours had to be an amazing person. Izuku says, seeing the smile on his hero's face and could see how genuine it was. She was. All Might says after a bit. Izuku looks at him for a bit and couldn't help but ask. Okay, for my next question. What happened to you? Why are you like, well, this? Izuku asks, gesturing to All Might's current state. The pro sighs and knew that this question was going to pop up eventually. Well, for that kid, is a long story. All Might says, making himself comfortable, I got dash, he was saying the story but he suddenly gets cut off by an explosion. The two turn and see the city in search of where the explosion went off. Stop you fool. You're going to get yourself killed. One of the heroes yells at Izuku who doesn't listen and still runs toward the villain in a panic as he thinks about what he was doing. What am I doing? Why am I running? Why can't I stop my body from moving? Izuku thought. The villain sees him running toward them and quickly recognizes him. Oh, it's you again. Back for some more. The villain yells, turning to Izuku and preparing to attack the boy who sees this and panics. Think you idiot think. What would a hero do? No, what would I do? Izuku thought. He looks at the villain, hoping for something that could be something to use against it, and he spots that very thing. It's two egg-like eyes. That's it. Go for the eyes. He thought as he sees a stick in a burning piece of debris. He grabs the stick out of the debris and sees it was burning at the end of it and gains an idea. Hey slimy. Izuku yells, gaining the villain's attention, catch. He yells, throwing the burning stick at the villain, catching it off guard as the stick flies through the air and hit the villain's eyes with the burning end. My eyes. The villain roars. Screaming from the pain, but that was the moment Izuku was looking for as he runs to the teens and starts to try and get them out by prying off the sludge around them. Bakugou turns his head and sees Izuku, trying to pull the sludge off. Deku. Bakugou thought. The girl managed to enlarge her hand and pries the sludge around her mouth, allowing her to breathe properly again as she turns to Izuku. What are you doing? The girl yells as Izuku looks at her. I don't know. My legs. They just started moving on their own before I could think. But. Izuku says before he lets out a wobbly smile. It looked like, you two needed saving. He says. All Might somehow hears this and is surprised by what he said. This kid. All Might thought as he starts to smile. The sludge villain recovers from the burns and looks down at Izuku and glares at the greenette. That's it you DMN brat. The villain shouts, you're so dead. Raises its slimy hand up in the air and swings it down at Izuku. The boy sees the hand coming and prepares himself for the strike as a large dust cloud large when the attack connects, but the thing was, that Izuku feels nothing, he felt the force of the hit but he didn't feel any pain which. Izuku. A familiar voice yells in front of him, causing Izuku to open his eyes and look at who was in front of him as utter relief fills his body. There you are. It was Toru, holding the sludge villain's hand with little difficulty. Toru. Izuku shouts, looking at the dragon girl in front of him as she looks at him and smiles. I've been looking for you everywhere. What were you thinking? Disappearing and leaving me behind? Toru says, smiling at him before she feels a tug from the hand she was holding. She turns around and looks at the villain who was trying to pry its hand from hers. Oh, it's you again. She utters, giving the villain a menacing glare as her irises and pupils start to glow. The villain sees her and recognizes her as it starts to shiver. Wait, and no, not you again. The villain yells, trying to get its hand away from Toru and run away from her, but she refused to let it go as she turns to it with her bangs shadowing her eyes. You were trying to hurt my Izuku, for that. Toru mutters as she slowly raises her hand up, making it into a fist which causes the villain to freeze in fear as flashbacks appear to its eyes from earlier. Toru lifts her head up and grits her teeth at the villain. You will pay. She yells, bringing her fist down onto the villain's body, causing it to start being pulled away from the pressure. The villain tried to get itself together and fight against the pressure, but it was getting too much for it to handle as it struggles back while bubbling up. NNO. The villain yells right before imploding and is sent splatting all over the area. The force of impact causes a massive amount of air and wind to pick up, and some of the crowd had to hold something to keep balance as a tornado formed and spins into the sky and disappear. As the wind died down, everyone looks back to the middle of the street and see Toru holding Izuku in her left arm while holding the red-haired girl and an unconscious Bakugou in her right hand, as the building around that were burning from the attack had been extinguished by the wind. Just as they were about to. Drip drip drip. Water starts to fall down to the earth as rain clouds begin to form the sky throughout the city. The crowd of civilians was in shock and awe at seeing the rain fall down on them and after seeing what just happened. She punched that villain and changed the weather, with one punch. Holy CRP, that girl is strong. Some of the crowd chatted, talking about how powerful this girl was and comparing her to All Might and his strength. The pros then started to act and gather up the villain who was out cold from the blow. While some were looking over the burnt or destroyed buildings, looking to see if there were any people still in them. While for Izuku and Toru. You idiot. Why did you go and do something like that? What would have happened if the villain attacked you with a great force? A hero yells at Izuku as he and the other heroes were scolding Izuku for running into a villain scene. Toru was also there near Izuku, watching this as she grits her teeth in anger at how these people were yelling at her Izuku for doing something right. The medics were taking Bakugou to a nearby hospital for observation and treatment, while some were attending to the red-haired girl who was getting praised by other heroes for her bravery, but she was ignoring them and was looking at the two getting yelled at. The hero yells at Izuku and then turns his attention to Toru. And you? Just what the hell was that? The hero asks, glaring at her. Doing the right thing. Toru says, making the hero look at her as if she wasn't intimidated by his glare. What was that, girlie? The hero asks. I did something right thing. Saving my friend from danger before he could get hurt or worse. Toru says. The hero looks at her in anger at her attitude. Now you listen here, girlie dash, the hero was saying, but trying to say something, but stopped when he sees Toru was glaring at him with her eyes glowing at her as an aura was flowing off her, sending chills down the hero's spine, fighting him. As he regains his bearings, he was about to speak, but... Hey! Leave them alone. A voice yells, cutting the hero off. They turn and see the red-haired girl looking at them, ignoring the other heroes around her. They came and saved me. They are heroes. So lay off them. She yells, looking at the heroes. But they intervened in a villain situation. One of the other heroes says. No, the green-haired kid only threw a burning stick at the villain's eyes and the horned girl only threw a punch at the villain. The red-haired girl says. She used her quirk to do the punch. Another hero points out as Toru just looks at them with a raised eyebrow. Oh, I didn't use a quirk. Toru says. This causes all of the heroes and some of the crowd to turn to her and look at her in shock. What? The first hero utters, trying to make sense of what she said. There was no way the amount of strength you used on that villain was not a quirk. He says. I didn't use a quirk. I just threw a punch. Toru says, nonchalantly, as the heroes were further shocked by this. No one is that naturally strong. Another hero yells, not believing this at all. I am. Toru says, with a nonchalant expression. The heroes look at her and could see that she wasn't lying, which threw them into a bind. They couldn't arrest either of the two since they never used a quirk, but they couldn't exactly let them go due to them intervening in hero business, even if they saved the day. After some time, the first hero lets out a sigh and looks at the two. Fine. We'll only let you two go with a warning. That is if you two don't do anything like thing again in the future. Alright? The hero asks with Izuku and Toru nodding. Yes/yep. The two say as the hero nods. Good. Now get out of here. The hero says before turning around and walking toward the scene to assist in anything. The two teens just look at the hero leave before turning to each other and shrugging their shoulders as they just gather their things and start leaving the area, but before they could. Hey! They stop after hearing someone call out to them from behind. They turn around and see the red-haired girl standing there and was looking at them. I wanted to say thank you for saving me. I really appreciate it. The red-haired girl says, bowing to them. The two look at her for a bit before Izuku just smiles nervously. It was nothing, really, Izuku says, scratching the back of his head, but the red-haired girl looks up at them. But it was something. You saved me, both of you did. I owe you to my life. You're my heroes. The red-haired girl says, surprising the two, especially Izuku as he looks at her with wide eyes. Why you really mean that? Izuku stutters with the red-haired nodding. Yeah. I do. The girl says as she sticks her hand out to them. I'm Itsuka Kendo. Nice to meet you too. The red-haired, now known to be as Itsuka Kendo says. The two look at her hand as Izuku takes it and processes to shake it. Izukumidoriya. Izuku introduces himself to her. While he was shaking her hand, his mind thought back to her name and thought of something. Wait, did she say her last name was Kendo? Does that mean she's related to Rappa? He thought, hearing their names were the same, and the possibility arose. He lets go of Kendo's hand as Toru takes it. Toru Midoriya. Toru introduces herself to Kendo while shaking her hand. Oh, are you guys siblings? Kendo asks, hearing the same last name. Well. Izuku was going to explain, but unfortunately, Toru beat him to it. We're not. He's my MSTR and I'm his CC maid. Toru says with a smile as Izuku looks at her in horror while Kendo looked at her bewilderment. Booksk. Kendo utters, unsure of what to think of this as Izuku frantically waves his hands. No. It's not that. She's my distant cousin from my mom's side and she's just living with us. Izuku says, trying to convince Kendo that he was telling the truth. Really? Kendo asks. Why yes. What she just said was a joke. She was joking, in her own way. Izuku says, as Toru looks at him with a raised eyebrow. But, I wasn't joking. Toru was about to say, but Izuku stops her when he places his hand on her mouth and covers it shut. She was joking, really. Izuku says, smiling, but his smile looked to be a bit forced. Well, still, I'm grateful to you two for saving me. I hope that I can repay that to you someday. Kendo says. She looks at the sky, which was started pouring down rain, but could see that the clouds were breaking away and saw the change in color, altering her. I've got to go, my parents are going to freak if I show up late and I live in another prefecture. She says, scrambling and gathering her things. Once she does, she turns back to the two and bows at them one more time. I hope that we'll meet again soon. Bye. Kendo yells as she stands up straight and rushes off, her way back home. The two watch her leave and Izuku waves her bye. Bye. Izuku says. After seeing Kendo disappear, he sighs and releases his hand from Toru's mouth, much to her disappointment. Let's go home, Toru. He says. After that, they process in leaving the scene and walk in the rain for a bit. When they reached their neighborhood, the weather had cleared up and the sun was starting to set as the sky was turning orange. The two hadn't spoken once during their walk home as Toru turns to Izuku and sees he was looking down at the floor, looking rather sad. Are you okay, Izuku? Toru asks. Her question causes Izuku to snap out of his thought and looks around. Huh? Izuku utters, looking around and sees Toru looking at him with a worried expression. What was that, Toru? He asks. I asked if you were alright. Toru asks. Izuku just chuckles and rubs the back of his head. Yeah. I'm fine. Really? Izuku says, smiling a bit while Toru just looks at him. Are you sure? Toru asks again. Izuku stops rubbing the back of his head and looks at her with a serious look. Yeah, I am. Thanks for asking. Izuku says. Okay. Toru says. The two go back to silence for a bit until one of them decided to break it. Thank you, Toru, for saving me back there with the villain. I don't know what would have happened if you didn't. Izuku says, looking at Toru as she turns to him with a surprised look before it turns into a happy expression. It was nothing. I'd do anything for you and protect you. Toru says, with a bright smile, which catches Izuku off guard a bit as he had never seen Toru smile like that before, but he thought it suited her as he starts to smile. Thanks, Toru. Izuku says, smiling a little bit. He looks at the setting sun and thought back to All Might. He wanted to apologize to him for what had happened and being the case of why the villain got loose in the front place by he didn't find him. Maybe I could write on his website and apologize there. Izuku thought as he sighs. Wonder what else could happen now. I am here, young man. All Might yells, suddenly appearing in front of the teens, startling them. W.O. All Might? Izuku yells, surprised in seeing him there. You again. Toru yells, equally surprised. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for more crossovers. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Pixel's fanbook on fanfiction.net. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.